Hello there, and thank you for tuning in to see what the world looks like through atheist eyes. I'm Frank Zindler from American Atheist Press, and I'm your host for this third program in a series of interviews with August Brunsman, the founder and executive director of the Secular Student Alliance. Let's see what he has to tell us about the Secular Student Alliance and what all it's up to these days. Let's join the conversation. Welcome back to the interviews with August Brunsman, the Executive Director of the Secular Student Alliance. Welcome back, August.
Thank you again.
We've already learned about your personal intellectual and philosophical development, and we've learned about the beginning of the Secular Student Alliance itself and its, you might say, prehistory, the student free thought groups that preceded it. Let's now today, in this final interview, let's focus on the Secular Student Alliance itself and where it's going to go. First of all, what is the Secular Student Alliance?
Sure. So the Secular Student Alliance is an independent, nonprofit organization that is focused on sort of two major goals, which I'll unpack a bit, which are what we call normalizing secularism and spreading secular values. So another way to think about normalizing secularism is that we want secular students as students and then also as adults afterwards. We want them to thrive as valued members of society. And know that there's nothing wrong with them. Mm-hmm. And some students struggle with that and some don't. And we also want society at large to know, hey, just because somebody has a sort of a different this world kind of focused set of values, it doesn't mean that they are immoral or untrustworthy or anything like that. So we want to both give students the confidence that they are first-class citizens and let everybody else know that they are too. Mm-hmm. So we want secular students to sort of proudly integrate themselves into society. And then that's spreading secular values. I mean, that's spreading values that have that are focused around concern for the future and present world, mm-hmm. As opposed to worlds beyond that we cannot detect or interact with in any way. So which I don't know. I think that having the great fortune to sort of have this be my job, I kind of live in a bubble where it seems almost ridiculous to talk about my values are focused on the concern for the present and future world, but of course it's not always
the Easter
obvious.
Bunny is not something you normally worry about.
As it were, yeah. So those are the sort of two big things, and so we want to reach out to students who think it's important to them that their worldview doesn't involve the supernatural, and students who are interested in making this and the future version of this world a better place. So that's the intersection, and the primary tool we use to do that, although we use some other ones too, are student groups. Mm-hmm. And so to some extent, that's a little bit because that's where we grew out of, but I think the main reason that we're focused on student groups is that they work. So it's this amazing model where you can get volunteers, and I was one of them for many years as a volunteer, to go and lead these communities. And the communities out there do all sorts of great things. They provide landing zones to people who maybe were raised in a really conservative background and need a place to kind of explore and express themselves. They also provide a mechanism for advocacy. So if there's a group on a campus where there's prayer at the football games, things like that, or other sort of things that, and we can talk about intersectionality in a bit, but something that our students especially have kind of led the way on this, and we're backing them up, which is having our values and our lives and our secularness be intersectional. So it is not merely the case that we want to form the cult of atheism and yay atheism, but we also want to interact with the world. You don't
worship Madeline Murray O'Hare? What's the problem here?
She's great, but not worship. So for instance, our group at Sacramento City College was really involved with some other groups on the campus to lobby for, they were successful, really improving how trans students were treated on that campus, and sort of recognizing that they need to be part of that campus, part of that community, and trivial sorts of trivial changes like making sure there were gender neutral bathrooms in every building, like little things like that. So our group was involved in that. So
good for you.
So kind of spreading those values out. And then service is also a really big deal. So that can be small in terms of like maybe it's just going and helping with a campus trash pickup day or something like that. But this is the only world we have and we want to make it better. So go and do it. And then education ends up being spectacularly important in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah.
Like students are, I mean, by the definition sort of being a student, you're there to learn. But we're really interested, our communities in general are really interested in educating themselves and educating their broader community. So they might be interested in learning more about science, they might be interested in learning more about, say, telomeres and things like that, something I know you're really interested in, and kind of, what science has to say about the future of their lives as they're beginning their sort of professional lives, and what will that be like and how will it shape their lives. And also very interested in educating the broader community. And a really popular event along those lines is something we do, it's every third Thursday in April every year. It's Ask an Atheist Day. It's and sometimes the groups are Ask an Atheist or Agnostic or Humanist. They throw on other labels too, because we're all about the Big Ten. But students will hang up signs.
Ask an unbeliever.
Right, yeah. Ask the godless. Whatever you want. Whatever engages people, honestly. And students will come up to them and ask them questions, and they can ask them, well, what do you think happens after you die if you don't believe you go to heaven? Or where do you get your values from? Or what do you yell during sex instead of, oh God? Whatever it is. And the point isn't to convert, the point is to engage in dialogue and create better mutual understanding. And I mean, I'm not saying that some of our students don't occasionally try to change people's minds. They do.
Well, sure.
But at least with Ask an Atheist Day, the point is better mutual understanding.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very good.
And educating. Yeah.
Now, how many groups do you have roughly at this moment?
So there are roughly 270 groups around the country right now.
Wow.
And about
some of those are high school?
Right. About 10% are at high schools. High schools are very difficult to organize at.
I would think so, yeah.
If organizing at a campus, a college campus is like organizing at a bus stop, then organizing at a high school is like organizing at a checkout lane. Like at the grocery store. It's just people move through so fast and they have so little control over their time. But yeah, the high schools are definitely an option.
I would think also that there are very important tactical problems in organizing high schools, because the high school is the public school where the forces of religious oppression, if I may call it that, are brought most to bear, with whether it's prayers, saying the Lord's Prayer at the football game or whatever, and I would imagine you'd get a lot of pushback at the high school level.
You are correct. Yeah, we do get a fair amount of pushback. It's gotten better over the last 15 years that we've been doing this. It's gotten significantly better. It's not perfect, but a lot of administrators at public schools have no idea about the Equal Access Act. You said something really interesting there that I want to really flag, which I think is relevant both at the high school and college level, about sort of like prayers at high school football games or prayers at other parts of the school. So unfortunately, the Supreme Court we have right now is not as predisposed towards protecting, the Establishment Clause
and the separation of church and state.
Right. And I think what is desperately needed is to not, in as much as litigation will work, I'm all for it, but I think we really need to stand up and be counted and let people know that we're here and that it really makes us feel excluded when you have a prayer. And they're getting to be, as we happen to be lucky, as you look at the demographic data of Americans, like right now, the young millennials going through college and high school right now, they are the least religious generation that the United States has ever had, and or at least since we've been keeping track, and that I think is a great opportunity. I don't think it's in itself a victory, because I think a lot of those people don't know how to get organized.
Exactly.
And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to go to that group and say, hey, like, you on your own, as many people have, you figured out that religion is not for you, but what is for you? What's next?
Yeah, they've arrived there themselves by whatever means, but they are not likely, without further help, to be involved in movements and so on that will continue this process, or continue this drift towards less and less religiosity.
That's exactly
more
right.
More self-reliance.
Yeah, and we, if you want to have voices in the boardroom or the council room or the newsroom or the courtroom of tomorrow, you need voices on the campus of today.
Exactly.
And that is exactly what we're doing, and that is what we are all about at the Secular Student Alliance. Through the groups, I mean, we support them in a zillion different ways. And people can go to secularstudents.org and learn about all the services.
That's right. We need to know about all of your social media outlets. We'll put them on the screen.
Absolutely.
So tell us what you have.
Sure. So there's a bunch of them, and we've made it really easy. It's all so on Twitter, for instance. We are at Secular Students, but if you want to go to the web address, it's twitter.com/Secular Students. If you want our Facebook page, it's facebook.com/Secular Students.
I see.
Our YouTube page is youtube.com/Secular Students.
Okay.
So it's all like that. We have an Instagram as well.
Okay.
So yeah, we're active on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and Instagram. And all of those places /Secular Students will find you. Will help you find us, I guess I should say.
That's why you're more successful than I am. I haven't learned these social media things yet.
They're a big part. They're a huge part of
Back when I was
life.
studying with Tutankhamun, of course, they didn't have anything like that.
But now they do. So
now they do.
Very, very important, and a big part of being young today. And I think that the internet is essential to the rise of non-belief.
So.
Absolutely essential.
Absolutely, indeed, I think the internet alone is to be credited with this surge in secular thought and secular expression. One of the things, as I've looked through the history of atheism and free thought movements and humanism, I have been struck by how again and again and again over the centuries the wheel had to be reinvented. Because people would rise up. I see this in particular, of course, in a focus. I'm a mythicist. I don't think that Jesus was an historical figure. And so I've done a lot of research on the history of this idea and research and writing on it. But I found that, starting with 1790s, which is the first one that I found, that incredible work was done. I mean, just marvelous work. And published, and then it was just covered over with no rebuttal, no nothing. It was just silence, and within a few years, everyone forgot that had ever happened. And then a generation or two later, another scholar, independently, not knowing about the previous one, would have to discover this all over again. And I forget how many iterations of that process I counted since 1793 in my own field. But on the larger scale, this has been the case. We heard, it's part of our colloquial vocabulary, the village atheist. Well, that implies, of course, that there is only one.
Right.
And it also shows that this isolation of atheists in the past. But now you can go to the web, the internet, and you have just tons and tons of stuff, and you can make contact with many organizations, and so there is power then in this ability to unite with your fellow unbelievers. And it's power to not only just defend your own rights, but I think, and we'll ask you about this in the Secular Student Alliance in just a second, but I think it empowers you as a group then to head into the future to try to solve the problems that are facing this planet and this species. So that's what you're going to do, I hope.
Indeed, I hope so too. That's the plan. Yeah, I mean that rests at the core for me of why I spend my time on the Secular Student Alliance because, well, I think I will paraphrase, but in Carl Sagan's Cosmos series, a line of his that really got to me, and that was another thing that was kind of hitting me in my development that we didn't get into, but was Cosmos was a big deal. But Sagan said that he believed that our future depends powerfully on our ability to understand this world and this universe.
Yes, yes.
And it absolutely does. And we're seeing that right now, and I mean with climate change, it's a big deal. And we've had this vested interest and effort to kind of like stick our head in the sand about it.
Yes.
And it's really cost us. And it's my belief that the more people who, and I don't even at the end of the day, like I don't identify with a supernatural worldview, but like to whatever extent anybody we're willing to interact with or who's willing to interact with us is more willing to engage in a sort of skeptical, evidence-based kind of reasoning approach to the world, like every little bit that they're willing to move in that direction, I will take.
Sure.
And our groups are, I think, really powerful sources for showing people not only that like can you not only can you do that and you can make good decisions, but also like it's not well, rather than phrasing the negative, I'll phrase it in the positive, that you can have a beautifully meaningful, exciting, fulfilling life as a as a non-believer, and that and it is the experience of many people who go through the sort of transition process of having believed and then very slowly and painfully coming to a secular worldview, that they find that they actually have far more hope and feel in far more control. They may not be going on to spend eternity in heaven anymore, or well, I don't think they ever were. No. But they may not believe that anymore.
Yeah,
but at the same time, they also don't believe that their every single action is being recorded on high, and that they're being judged on every single little thing, and that there's some standard they're being judged by, which certainly is never quite perfectly articulated to them, and in addition to that is never really rings true. And we see this in so many different ways. Sort of, you hear this a lot from people who are who are lesbian or gay or bisexual or transgender, and also have a religious upbringing, that they're being told one thing, that they need to be straight, and then they have a super different experience of their life.
Yeah.
And and to run into those places where it's not a mere like slight misalignment of reality and your identity or your values, but it's one where it really cuts the core of who you are as a person, is running directly headlong against what you're being taught is good. And that is crushing to many people. And I think we have, I dare say, I think we have a moral obligation, or I feel a moral obligation to help people on their own explore pathways that maybe let them understand that there are better ways to understand their nature, better ways to understand where they came from, better ways to form their values, better ways to find meaning in their life. And I think that's through a secular worldview. It's really important.
Paraphrasing John Dewey, the philosopher, he said, men, and this was before gender-neutral language, he says, men have never done their utmost to advance the good in life because they have always depended upon a supernatural power to come and rescue them at the last minute.
Right.
That's the paraphrase part there. He was more eloquent than that. But still, I think this is very important, and I think this is what you're going toward, to help the students realize that if the world is going to be saved from whatever we're talking about, they are the ones that have to do it.
Absolutely.
And furthermore, they cannot depend upon illusions to help them solve problems.
Right, right. And in fact, given the sort of propensity of the human brain to see patterns where there are none, or to,
Yes.
kind of ignore thinking about a painful problem too late, because it's easier to not think about it if you don't have to deal with it right away. That those are things that you really are well advised to know that about human nature when you go into reasoning, and to constantly be, checking yourself, like, am I being realistic about my plans here? Am I engaging in false hope? Am I engaging in, some sort of common error in reasoning? And, having explicit intentional conversations about those things and getting aware about those things, and as you say, like, just saying to yourself, like, no one is going to come to save us other than ourselves.
Yes.
We're here. And the students are going to do it, and people that are not students anymore are also going to do it.
Yes.
We're going to do it together. The Secular Student Alliance we're focused on activating students and supporting students that are involved, but it's really important to know that the Secular Student Alliance is ultimately an intergenerational organization.
Sure.
I'm not in school anymore.
No.
There are most of, in fact, our donors, yourself included,
Yeah.
thank you, are not students anymore. You're paying it forward,
Yeah.
and our board of directors, some of them are students, some of them aren't. And there are lots and lots of people out there, the advisors to our groups, that are working together, and the students too, of course, are collaborating with other organizations that aren't student-focused either.
Yeah.
And that's really important. Like, we're in this together. We're only going to get through this if we support one another. I think we are far stronger if we remember to be intergenerational in our thinking throughout.
Yeah.
But that includes focusing on students some of the time. So, and we're a conduit to make that happen.
I almost forgot. One of your services that you produce that you have is a board of speakers.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, we have a speakers bureau. Yeah,
A speakers
we try
bureau.
to get out. Yeah, there's over 100 people on the speakers bureau, and I believe you are on the speakers bureau.
Tell our viewers now, if they want to have a speaker, what do they have to do?
Okay.
What kind of speakers? what do
Sure.
they do?
Okay. So, all right. If they want to have me or another one of the board members come out and talk about what is the Secular Student Alliance, just email us, ssa@secularstudents.org,
Okay.
and say, hey, I would love to learn more about what the Secular Student Alliance is doing. We can do that. The Speakers Bureau that we have, that is focused as a service to our campus groups. So we want to get people like you. We want to get Greta Christina. We want to get Dan Barker. We want to get them on campuses. And so this is essentially a streamlined way. Our speakers have agreed to try very hard to speak to our groups at least twice a year with some sort of reduced, or some speakers are generous to not have an honorarium at all. To work with our student groups. And sort of the flip side of that is that we have a whole checklist for the student groups to go through to make sure that the speakers have a really positive time, that the campus group, gets a really big crowd out, things like that. So we kind of come at it from both angles. And in as much as we're able, we also try to provide some funding to those speakers to help get them out there. And the students are usually responsible for getting some of the money as well to kind of go in together. But yeah, if you go to, I think it's secularstudents.org/ I think it's just speakers.
Yeah.
You can sort of learn all about that and get all the details.
Go to their webpage anyway.
Yep. Secularstudents.org.
And explore it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, August, I am so happy to see that I helped in some tiny little way in launching you there. And it occurs to me that we were talking about succession and so on. And I think on a much larger scale now I perceive a sense of succession to me.
Okay, fair enough.
And I'm delighted to have
a good way
you
to think.
walking into the space that I am progressively creating. I thank you so much for being on my show, and I hope the Secular Student Alliance just goes right into the stratosphere and expands continually, and I hope it will continue to have the positive effect on so many lives of thinking young people.
Thank you.
That's all for now. I'm Frank Zindler for American Atheists and American Atheist Press. See you next time.